Hey, this is Henry. Today we're going to be going over background settings, material settings, and screen captures using Rhino 6. What I'm showing you right now is a scene that I have in Rhino for a house, and I'm going to walk you through the different materials, the background gradient that I have, and how to produce a screen capture using Rhino 6. So, to start off, I'm going to just run you through the different materials that I already have in the scene. For this driveway, I created a pattern texture with a paving. And for the side of the house, I just made this white. But I also, if you look inside, I do have some wood for the stairs. And there's also glass so you can see through the windows. So the curtains I've also applied a translucent material. Now some of these things I've had to look up and use Google to apply some of these materials. So I'm going to show you how to do that. But I'm going to start off first with showing you how to change the background. Right now I have it set to a gradient. The default isn't set to that, so I'm going to show you how to change it by first going to my settings, by typing in settings. And if you want to go ahead and change your background, the first thing when your window setting comes up is you're going to go down to the bottom and select your view and click that arrow, and you're going to go to your display options. And if you want to change the background for your render view, you're going to go ahead and click on rendered, and your display mode options should show up. Now, by default, it's most likely set to application settings, which is a standard gray. And if you want to go ahead and change that, you can change this by selecting a solid color. And when you click on that box, this window comes up. You can select a different color here, or you can do an image file. So you can go ahead and just drop in an image as a background. And I'll just show you a quick example of that. If I were to select a file, hit OK. Now that shows up in the background. See that? Okay. What I'll show you is the gradient. And this gave me a sunset effect. It goes from a pink to a dark blue. But you're also able to do a gradient with four colors. Now what this does is it creates a color for every corner of your window. So there's a different color for every corner here. If I wanted to, I can change the bottom right. I can just select red, and that's going to change the bottom right corner. Okay, I'm going to go back to my settings that I had before, which is a pink to a blue. I'll just hit OK. But that's how you change the background of your setting. The next thing I'm going to go over is the materials and how to update your materials on different surfaces. You can do it by layers, but I'm just going to select the objects and update the object materials. So the first thing I'll do is I'll change the surface on this part of the building. And since this part of the building is joined with this, it's gonna actually apply it, which I want it to. I want to apply it to this entire portion of the building. And I'll show you how to do that. You can, after you select the surface, you're going to get your properties window pop up, and you're going to go to materials. When you click that, you will create a new material. I'm going to set custom, and I'm going to call it, I'm going to give it a new name, and I'll call it graphic. I was going to call it texture, but I can just call it graphics. Okay. So that's going to be my graphic. So when I can find it if I need to change it in the future. Okay. So then the next thing is it's going to ask me to custom settings, select the colors. Yours should have already been there. So when you go to colors, I'm going to click on this down arrow and I'm going to assign the texture. Now your dialog window is going to come up and you can go ahead and search for an image to place. So the first thing you're going to have to do, which I've already prepared, is I've downloaded some images that I want to use to apply as a graphic to this surface. So you can look for things online. I started building a library for myself, and for example, I have textures, and these are just like a concrete texture that I found on Google. So we can start with that. I'll go ahead and select the light gray here, open, and now it's applied the concrete material onto that surface. As you can see, it's been applied, and it's been applied all throughout on all sides. Now, the thing is, we want to be able to go ahead and change the scale. And the first thing that I like to do anytime that I apply a texture and I want to start manipulating it, I'm going to first isolate this. So I'm going to click and hold. I'm going to click isolate objects. So now this is one material. Now, like I said, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select this. I'm going to go to my texture mapping, and I'm going to go to apply box mapping. The box mapping for me has been the easiest way to manipulate the texture, and so I recommend using that. So the first thing is I'm going to click the corner, the furthest corner, and I'm going to go all the way to the other side, click the other furthest corner, and then I'm going to go to the top most part of the surface, which is up here. And that's basically a box of my entire surface that I want to apply this to. I hit enter, and now you can see the scale of the texture has changed slightly, and now it's also probably proportionate. But we can change that by scrolling down. This is going to allow you to change the rotation of the texture and the position of the texture. So for example, if I wanted this lighter patch, let's say, to show up in another part of the surface, I can slide this over. And to do that, if I wanted to slide it down, I'm going to have to slide it down in a Z. So that's my Z, the third option here. So if I go to 0, since it was at 95, 0 is going to go down. So it slid it down. Now you can see that the texture ends here, and it used to end up here. So I didn't see that line, right? Because it was a box. The box ended up here. So now you see the line. So I'm going to undo that so I can bring that back. If you have a seamless texture, most likely you won't ever get that. But a texture like concrete, sometimes you will get that line. Okay, just be aware of that. The other thing is that you can rotate the texture. Now I'm gonna go ahead and just show you a different material so you can see that rotation. So I'm gonna click on that surface again, go back to material, and I'm on the graphics. Here's the color, and it's showing that I'm using a file. So I'm gonna click back down here, change the texture. I'm gonna go back to my graphics, and I'll just choose this one here. So that has a triangular pattern. Now, this would be pretty obvious if I were to rotate it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and select this, go to my texture mapping. And if I want to rotate it, what I have to keep in mind is that I can rotate it in the X, Y, or Z. So if I wanted to rotate it in this direction, in other words, take it from here and rotate it over, and let's say I wanted to do 90 degrees, I'm going to have to find in what orientation that is. And based on this gumball, it looks like it's in the Y direction. I can check that. If I click here on shaded, I'm going to get my little orientation. And so it looks like that's in the Y orientation, or the Y axis. So I'll go ahead and click this again, go to my rendered. And this is X, this is Y. And if I wanted to rotate it in 90 degrees, I just type in 90, and it rotates it. So now I've been able to rotate it. If I want to move it, just to show you again, I can, let's say, in the Z direction, I can slide it down. Probably not enough, so let's do 90. You can see the step down, 85. So I can be a little bit more precise with this if I wanted to. This is the Y direction. So I'm not going to see the Y here, but I'll see the Y over here, right? Because it's going to slide in the direction where the green is. That's not going to affect this, and you'll see that here. So it's at 420. So let me increase it so that these triangles show up further this way. So I'll type in 450. Okay, you see that? This didn't change, but these did. I can keep going. 460. See that? Try it again. 475. Okay, so this surface and this surface, since it's on the axis of y, it's affecting the texture, but this is not. So if I wanted to change this, I have to move the x, which is not going to change these. So 136, I can change this to 145. You go. So now I change this, but I didn't change this side. Okay, so that's how you change the texture on your surfaces in terms of its location. I click on that surface again because I forgot. I want to show you one more thing, which looks like I've just messed something up here. I have no idea what I did. Okay, I'll go ahead and select that line again. Be careful when you scroll because as you scroll, it does change your options here, which that's what I must have done and I didn't notice. So I'm gonna just scroll this down. And here's something else that I usually like to have control over, and that's going to be my proportions in the X, Y, and Z of that texture map. So if I have a box or if I have a texture like a brick, the proportions are going to be pretty standard. And if I don't have the proportions correct, it's going to look stretched. And I can show you, as you can see, the triangles look um, for this mapping, it looks pretty normal. But if I wanted to, I can stretch these out. So I'll go to my scale. And if I don't lock it and I don't use any of these settings, I can change this from 850. I can change this to 5. And as you can see, I've affected the scaling. And it's basically squished that texture in one direction. So if you're looking for that effect, that's the way to do it. I'm basically just squishing the panel from instead of going all the way from here to the end, I'm making it from here to here, and then it repeats. So this will tile the material along your surface. So if I don't want to do that, I can make this more proportionate to the original image by locking and then setting 111. So it's all the same. Now when I change this, and let's say I change it to 100, you can see now everything is proportionate to the original image that I used as the file for the texture map. Okay, you want to see what this looks like for the entire building in rendered view, and that's how it looks. Now, if you have multiple things you want to apply this to, and you don't want to have to one by one try to apply this by selecting it and going over with what we just did, there is an option to do a match properties. And what that does is it changes basically everything except for the texture map. It does apply the texture, but it doesn't apply the texture mapping. And I'll show you how to change that too. So it's going to ask me to select objects to modify. Let's say I wanted to place it here and I wanted to place it here. I can hit enter. And then it's asking me for the source object. So I'm going to select that surface that I just applied that texture to. The match properties gives me options. I can change the name, I can change the layer, display to match. So all of these two match this over here in material, in curve piping. I don't know what that means, but you have your display color, print color, all of your settings basically will transfer from here to the surfaces that I selected. So I'm going to hit OK. There you go. Now it's been applied. But as you can see, there are different scales. I actually really like this scale right now. I think it's more proportionate to the facade. So what I'm going to do is, rather than applying this over to here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply this back over there. And so what I'll do is I'll select this surface. I'm going to go to this match mapping brush. When I click it, it's going to ask me to select the source object. So when I click here, see if it did it. Let me try again. Match. Maybe I'm doing this incorrectly. Try this again. That did change something, but it must have matched. Well, this changed now. I don't know how I did that. I missed it. Let's see how I did that. So I'm gonna select this surface, match, select the source objects. Click here. Hmm. Okay. Let's try this so I can get under the hood here. So I'm gonna isolate. I usually like to isolate when I need to really figure something out. So I click here, match this. That changed. Match this here, and it doesn't change, which is really really weird. Let's do something else. I'm gonna go ahead and change this from a graphic. I'm gonna apply that concrete again. So I'll go to materials, change texture. I don't know why. I feel like this might work, but so you can now clearly see where this ends. I want it to look more like this. So I should be able to click. Hmm. Okay, so I was able to successfully change this one. So I don't know what's really happening here, but I'll go back. I'm gonna go back to changing the material. So I'm in graphics. I'm gonna go ahead and change that back to my graphics. Let's get a new one on there. Okay. So I really do like the scale of this. Now, if I wanted to match it over here, I should be able to just match. I don't know why it's not working. I'm going to see if I can figure this out before wrapping up this video. But I do know that I can find the scale of that. And the scale right now is set to 2 for this one. When I click here, it's set to 100. So this is much smaller. Apparently it's much smaller. So let's see if I do 2. What happens? That's not right either. It's really weird. And maybe it's because I didn't set this as a box, and maybe that's what's going to change the effect for that. So let's go ahead and select that. I'm going to do apply a box mapping. So again, I'm doing the full extent of this object. If, by the way, this object was oriented um, in a way that wasn't orthographic, that's okay. You can just make the box bigger than the object, and that should work. It should be fine. So okay, so now I go ahead and made it into a box. Now I like the scale of this, and I want to make the scale of this show up over here because I don't know what happened, but I lost the scale. So I should be able to click here, do match, select over here, and now I can get them to match, no problem. And let's see, I'm going to do box mapping for this as well. Apply box, and as you can see, I can't. Yeah, there you go. I can get the full extent, but I can go a little bit further, and that's okay. And I can go a little bit higher, and that's okay. It just means it's going to go a little bit bigger than than the full extent of that object. But now they all match. They're exactly the same. So if I click on it here, let's see the scale. It's just one. So actually, these aren't even the same. So I'm going to go ahead and lock them, and I'm going to make x equal y, which also equals z. So they're all the same. Now I can just make this 100. Now they're all the same. Maybe I like the scale. What I can do now is come here, match that. So now these are exactly the same, and I can do the same thing here. Click, match that, and now they're exactly the same. The way to check is I can click here, and I can go to the size, the scale, and it's all set to 100 when I click here. And I can click here, same thing, all set to 100, all set to 100. Okay, great. Now to show you again, if I wanted to rotate, I can just select this. And if I want to rotate, let's say in this direction only, I want to rotate over there, I'm going to have to find my X. So I'm going to go to X and change this to 90. So it rotates it in 90 degrees. And so that changed. Now I wanted to do the same thing over here. I'm going to select it, match, click, and now these change directions too. Here you go. Okay. So now look at that. I'm not opposed to it. Okay. So just to show you, you can set up your scene by changing your background and by changing your surface material. I showed you how to change the texture. The shadows came in because I have a sun setting, and you can change that, which I won't do that for this video, but if you do want to change it, you can go ahead and apply a different sun direction and intensity. So if I wanted to change the shadow, I need to change my north. Right now my north is 90 degrees, which is set to Y. And I believe that means, let's see, Y is over here. So this is north. This facade over here, this surface is facing north. So I'd be looking at the sun that way. Sorry, I wouldn't be facing at the sun that way. That means that way is north. Okay. So if I wanted to change my north, I can just go ahead and change it up here with these settings. And you can change your sun position by manipulating the year, time of the year, and time of the day. So just by changing this, you might be able to see it here. So you can see it's getting more morning, more daylight, and the sun's moving across. If I'm not happy with my shadow, since this is north, the sun, it makes sense that the sun, this is located in the United States. So the sun is going to be south on that side of the building, and that's why we're getting shadows here. If I wanted to change the shadows, I can just say, hey, look, I'm going to change my north. Instead of Y, I'm going to change it to uh, I guess, minus y, which is 270 degrees. And as you can see now, the sun is behind my view. And as I change the time of the day, now I don't have shadows being casted from this mass onto my driveway. Okay, and once I have something I like, I can set that, move my view here. And the last thing is, um, if you have enough context in your scene, you can really make this look realistic. So I'm going to go in here and turn on my sight because I do have some context. And I'll just show you what the output looks like. So I put some plants here. I put a fence with some plants here, some more paving, and neighboring buildings, and some more plants. So now it looks like a real building. If I want to go ahead and output this, I'm going to type in screen capture to file. Okay. Now, if I select that, it's basically going to say, okay, whatever I'm looking at, it's going to save it as a JPEG, and I can name whatever I want. So I can call this entry one, go to my desktop, go ahead and save, and that's it. The image is saved, and now that's a JPEG. I can zoom into this. Now the resolution is only going to be as good as your screen. This isn't a true render, but it's a quick way to be able to export your drawings. And with Rhino 6 and its new shadow features, you're actually able to get something that looks pretty realistic to the scene. So thank you very much for watching, and good luck.